Hey everyone! Before we dive into this incredible story, if you love heartwarming animal stories like this one, make sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on amazing content like this. Trust me, this story is going to blow your mind. Now let's get into it. The story I'm about to tell you has become one of the most remarkable tales in the annals of wildlife conservation and human-animal interaction. What began as a simple act of compassion on a remote Brazilian beach would eventually capture the hearts of millions around the world and fundamentally change how we understand the emotional capacity of marine birds. This is the story of Dindim the Magellanic penguin and João Pereira de Souza, an elderly Brazilian fisherman whose unlikely friendship would challenge our assumptions about interspecies bonds and demonstrate that love, loyalty, and gratitude transcend the boundaries we imagine exist between humans and the natural world. To understand this story properly, we need to understand the place where it all began. Ilha Grande, or Big Island, is located off the coast of Rio de Janeiro state in southeastern Brazil. This tropical paradise is characterized by lush Atlantic rainforest, pristine beaches, and crystal-clear waters. The island has a fascinating history. Once home to a notorious maximum security prison that closed in 1994, it has since transformed into an ecological sanctuary and tourist destination, though much of it remains wonderfully undeveloped. João Pereira de Souza lived in a small village on this island, in a modest house near the beach. At 71 years old when this story began in 2011, João was a retired bricklayer and part-time fisherman who had spent his entire life near the ocean. He was a simple man who lived simply, rising with the sun each morning and spending his days maintaining his small property, fishing for his dinner, and enjoying the peaceful rhythm of island life. The Brazilian coast where João lived is far from the natural habitat of Magellanic penguins. These birds typically inhabit the colder waters of southern South America, breeding primarily along the coasts of Argentina, Chile, and the Falkland Islands. They're named after Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, who first recorded seeing these creatures during his voyage in 1520. Every year, these penguins undertake remarkable migrations, traveling thousands of miles along the South American coast in search of food, sometimes reaching as far north as Brazil during the Southern Hemisphere's winter months. It was March 2011, during the late summer in the Southern Hemisphere, when João took his usual morning walk along the beach near his home. The sun was already climbing in the sky, promising another hot day, and the tide had recently gone out, leaving the beach scattered with the typical debris that ocean waves deposit: seaweed, driftwood, shells, and the occasional piece of human refuse that serves as a constant reminder of our species' impact on the marine environment. As João walked along the shoreline, something unusual caught his eye. Among the rocks near the water's edge, he spotted what appeared at first to be a dark, oil-covered stone. But as he approached, the shape moved slightly, and João realized with a start that he was looking at a bird, a penguin, impossibly far from its natural home, and in terrible condition. The penguin was lying motionless, barely breathing. Its once black and white plumage was completely soaked in crude oil, the thick, toxic substance coating its feathers and rendering them useless for both waterproofing and insulation. The bird's eyes were half closed, and it was clear that without immediate intervention, it would not survive much longer. The oil had probably come from a ship passing through Brazilian waters, perhaps from a small spill or from vessels illegally cleaning their tanks at sea, a practice that, while prohibited, still occurs far too often in international waters. João didn't hesitate. Despite having no experience with penguins or wildlife rescue, he felt an immediate connection to this suffering creature. Perhaps it was his lifelong relationship with the ocean and its inhabitants, or perhaps it was simply human compassion, but João knew he had to try to help. He carefully gathered the penguin in his arms. The bird was too weak to resist and carried it back to his home. What followed was a week of intensive, round-the-clock care that would have challenged even an experienced wildlife rehabilitator. João had taken on a monumental task, though he didn't fully realize it at the time. Cleaning a penguin covered in crude oil is an extremely delicate and time-consuming process. Oil damages feathers by breaking down their natural waterproofing, and it's toxic if ingested when the bird tries to preen itself. Many seabirds die not from the initial oil contamination, but from hypothermia, starvation, or poisoning in the days that follow. João started by creating a safe, quiet space in his backyard where the penguin could rest. He used an old wooden box as a shelter, lining it with soft cloths. Then came the painstaking work of cleaning the oil from the bird's feathers. This couldn't be done with ordinary soap. Petroleum-based oils require special treatment. João used a mixture of gentle soap and warm water, working carefully and methodically, section by section, being careful not to stress the already weakened bird further. The process took 3 days of repeated washings. Between cleaning sessions, João would let the penguin rest, monitoring its breathing and trying to assess its condition. He named the bird Dindim, a common term of endearment in Brazil, similar to calling someone sweetie or dear one in English. The name stuck, and from that moment on, the penguin had an identity beyond just being a rescued animal. But cleaning Dindim's feathers was only the first challenge. The penguin was severely malnourished and dehydrated, too weak to eat on its own. Magellanic penguins primarily eat small fish like anchovies, sardines, and squid, diving to depths of up to 300 feet to catch their prey. João, as a fisherman, had ready access to fresh fish, but getting Dindim to eat was another matter entirely. For the first 2 days, Dindim refused all food. This is common with stressed and traumatized birds. Their survival instinct is suppressed by shock and illness. João had to get creative. He began by trying to drip small amounts of water into the penguin's beak, just enough to combat dehydration without causing the bird to choke. Then he tried offering tiny pieces of fresh sardine, the smallest he could cut, practically forcing them into Dindim's beak and hoping the bird's swallowing reflex would kick in. Gradually, painstakingly, it worked. On the 3rd day, Dindim swallowed a small piece of fish voluntarily. By the 4th day, the penguin was eating small amounts regularly. By the end of the week, Dindim was consuming approximately a pound of fish per day, still less than the 2 to 3 pounds a healthy Magellanic penguin typically requires, but enough to begin the recovery process. João's dedication during this period was remarkable. He adjusted his entire routine around Dindim's needs, getting up multiple times during the night to check on his patient, spending hours each day cleaning and feeding the bird, and researching everything he could about penguin care. He consulted with local wildlife authorities and even contacted veterinarians in larger cities. Though help was limited given his remote island location, as Dindim's physical condition improved, something unexpected began to happen. The penguin, which should have remained wary of human contact as wild animals typically do, began to show signs of attachment to João. When the old fisherman would approach, Dindim would make soft, chirping sounds, the kind of vocalizations penguins use to communicate with their mates and offspring. The bird would follow João around the backyard, waddling after him with the characteristic penguin gait that looks comical but is actually quite efficient on land. By the 2nd week of rehabilitation, Dindim had regained significant strength. The bird's feathers, now clean and properly aligned through natural preening behavior, had regained their waterproof quality. Dindim was eating well and had put on weight, filling out the gaunt frame that João had first rescued from the beach. All signs indicated that the penguin was ready to return to the ocean. João knew what he had to do. As much as he had grown fond of Dindim, he understood that penguins are wild animals that belong in the ocean, not in someone's backyard. Keeping Dindim would have been selfish and ultimately harmful to the bird. So one morning, João carried Dindim back to the same beach where he had found him and gently placed the penguin near the water's edge. What happened next was completely unexpected. Instead of immediately heading into the ocean, Dindim looked at João, then at the water, then back at João. The penguin made no move to leave. João tried encouraging the bird, walking toward the water himself, but Dindim just followed him. Eventually, João had to turn his back and walk away, hoping that Dindim would take the opportunity to return to the sea. But Dindim had other plans. The penguin followed João all the way back to his house. No matter how many times João tried to release Dindim over the next few days, the result was the same. The penguin refused to leave. It became clear that Dindim had imprinted on João during the rescue period, viewing the elderly fisherman not as a human, but as something like a parent or mate figure. João found himself in an unusual situation. He consulted again with wildlife authorities, who advised that if the penguin wouldn't leave voluntarily, forcing it could cause undue stress. They suggested waiting to see if Dindim's natural instincts would eventually overcome the learned attachment. So João and Dindim settled into an unexpected routine. The penguin would spend days in João's backyard or on the nearby beach, and João would continue feeding and caring for his unusual guest. For nearly 11 months, Dindim stayed with João. The penguin had the run of the property and would often accompany João on his walks along the beach. Local villagers grew accustomed to seeing the odd pair, an elderly man and a penguin, walking together like the oldest of friends. Children were delighted by Dindim and would sometimes gather to watch the penguin waddle around João's yard, though João was careful to ensure that Dindim wasn't overly stressed by attention. During this period, João learned Dindim's personality quirks and preferences. The penguin disliked being touched by anyone except João and would peck at strangers who got too close. Dindim had favorite spots to rest, one under a particular tree in João's backyard, another on a specific cluster of rocks near the beach. The penguin seemed to understand João's routines and would position itself near the door in the morning, waiting for their daily walk. As February 2012 approached, marking nearly a full year since Dindim's rescue, something began to change in the penguin's behavior. Dindim became restless, spending more time at the water's edge, staring out at the ocean. The bird's vocalizations changed too, becoming more frequent and more insistent, with a quality that seemed to express longing. João recognized what was happening. The breeding season for Magellanic penguins typically begins in September and runs through February. During this time, adult penguins return to their breeding colonies, often traveling thousands of miles to reach the same nesting sites they've used in previous years. Despite Dindim's attachment to João, the ancient genetic programming that has guided penguins for millions of years was asserting itself. One morning in late February, João woke to find Dindim standing at the water's edge, facing south. This time, when João approached, the penguin looked at him, made a series of soft vocalizations, and then waded into the water. João watched as Dindim swam out beyond the breaking waves, diving and surfacing several times. Then, with a final look back toward the beach, Dindim dove deep and swam away. João stood on the beach for a long time, watching the spot where Dindim had disappeared. He felt a profound mixture of emotions. Happiness that Dindim had recovered sufficiently to return to the wild, sadness at losing his companion, and worry about whether the penguin would survive the long journey ahead. He returned to his house that day feeling that a special chapter of his life had closed, but he couldn't have imagined what would happen next. In June 2012, just 4 months after Dindim's departure, João was working in his backyard when he heard a familiar sound, a distinctive chirping that he immediately recognized. He turned around in disbelief to find Dindim standing at the edge of his property, looking slightly thinner from the long journey, but otherwise healthy and vibrant. The reunion was emotional. Dindim waddled up to João, making excited vocalizations and allowing the old man to pet his head and back, something the penguin had never permitted anyone else to do. João was overwhelmed with joy and amazement. The odds of Dindim finding his way back to this specific beach, to this specific house, after swimming thousands of miles through the vast South Atlantic, were astronomical. Yet here was the penguin, clearly having deliberately returned. This time, Dindim stayed for about 8 months before the breeding instinct called again and the penguin departed in February 2013. João was less sad this time, having learned that Dindim's departure wasn't permanent. And sure enough, in June 2013, Dindim returned again. A pattern had emerged, one that would continue year after year. Every June or July, during the South American winter when Magellanic penguins migrate northward to warmer feeding grounds, Dindim would arrive at João's beach. The penguin would spend approximately 8 months with João before departing again in February or March for the breeding season, presumably returning to colonies in southern Argentina or Chile. As word of Dindim and João's friendship spread, first through the local community, then regionally, and eventually internationally, scientists became interested in this remarkable case. Biologists, animal behaviorists, and ornithologists wanted to understand what was driving Dindim's behavior. Why would a wild penguin repeatedly return to the same human over multiple years? Several theories emerged. The most widely accepted explanation involves a combination of imprinting and learned behavior. During the critical period when Dindim was recovering from the oil contamination, the penguin was in a vulnerable state, similar in some ways to a chick dependent on parental care. During this time, Dindim's brain apparently formed a powerful association between João and safety, food, and care. This type of imprinting, while more commonly studied in the context of young animals and their parents, can occasionally occur in adult animals under extreme circumstances, but imprinting alone doesn't fully explain Dindim's behavior. Many rescued and rehabilitated animals form attachments to their rescuers but don't return after being released into the wild. What made Dindim different was likely a combination of factors. First, there's the navigational aspect. Magellanic penguins are known for their remarkable ability to navigate across vast ocean distances, returning to the same breeding sites year after year with extraordinary precision. They use a combination of environmental cues, the position of the sun and stars, the Earth's magnetic field, ocean currents, and possibly even olfactory signals to find their way. Dindim had apparently incorporated João's location into this mental map, treating it as a kind of seasonal home base equivalent to a breeding or feeding ground. Second, there's the question of resource availability. Ilha Grande and the waters around João's home provided Dindim with a reliable food source during the non-breeding season. While João continued to supplement Dindim's diet with fresh fish, the penguin was also able to hunt independently in the coastal waters. This combination of reliable human-provided food and natural hunting opportunities created an ideal situation from the penguin's perspective. Third, and perhaps most important, there appeared to be a genuine social bond between João and Dindim. Penguins are highly social animals that form strong pair bonds with mates and maintain these relationships across multiple breeding seasons. In the wild, Magellanic penguins demonstrate what scientists call mate fidelity. Approximately 90% of penguin pairs remain together from one breeding season to the next. Some penguins maintain pair bonds for their entire lives, which can span 20 years or more. The behaviors Dindim displayed toward João were remarkably similar to the behaviors penguins show toward their mates, following closely, vocalizing when separated, allowing physical contact, and showing clear preference for one individual over all others. From an anthropomorphic perspective, one might say that Dindim viewed João as family from a scientific standpoint. The penguin's behavior suggested a social bond analogous to pair bonding, adapted to an interspecies context. Dr. João Paulo Krajewski, a biologist from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro who studied Dindim's case, noted that this represented an extremely rare example of a wild marine bird forming a long-term, consistent relationship with a specific human. While there are documented cases of wild birds returning to people who fed them, the duration, consistency, and apparent emotional depth of the Dindim-João relationship was unique in the scientific literature. As the years passed, João and the community around him adjusted to the annual cycle of Dindim's visits. The penguin became something of a local celebrity, with villagers marking the calendar by Dindim's arrivals and departures. "Dindim's back," children would shout, running to tell their neighbors when the penguin appeared on the beach each winter. João's daily routine during Dindim's visits centered around his unusual companion. Each morning, João would prepare fresh fish for Dindim, primarily sardines, but occasionally other small fish that João caught himself or purchased from other local fishermen. While Dindim could hunt independently, and often did, João liked to ensure his friend was well fed, especially early in the visit when the penguin would arrive somewhat thin from the long migration. The two would often spend hours together on the beach. João would sit on a favorite rock outcropping, and Dindim would rest nearby, preening feathers or simply standing companionably beside the old man. Sometimes João would talk to Dindim, telling the penguin about local news, his thoughts, or memories from his long life. Whether Dindim understood the words was irrelevant. The penguin clearly responded to the tone and cadence of João's voice, often making soft chirping responses as if participating in the conversation. João was careful to maintain boundaries that preserved Dindim's wild nature. He never tried to confine the penguin or restrict its movements. Dindim was free to come and go as desired, to spend days hunting in the ocean or exploring the coastline. The relationship worked precisely because it respected Dindim's autonomy while providing a consistent point of connection. Over time, João learned to read Dindim's moods and signals. He could tell when the penguin was content, when it was agitated, when it wanted company, and when it preferred to be left alone. He learned the different vocalizations Dindim used and what each seemed to mean: greeting sounds, alarm calls, contentment chirps. In turn, Dindim learned João's patterns and seemed to understand basic aspects of human behavior, like recognizing when João was preparing food or getting ready for their beach walk. Neighbors would often see João and Dindim together and marvel at the relationship. Maria da Silva, one of João's neighbors, later told reporters, "It was the most beautiful thing to watch them together. You could see the love between them. That penguin looked at João the way a dog looks at its owner. No, it was even more than that. It was like watching two old friends who had known each other forever." In 2016, 5 years after Dindim's initial rescue, the story caught the attention of Brazilian media. A local television crew came to Ilha Grande to film João and Dindim together, producing a short documentary segment about their relationship. The footage was remarkable. It showed Dindim following João along the beach, responding to his calls, resting beside him, and allowing João to pet and hold him in ways that would be impossible with a normal wild penguin. The video went viral almost immediately after being posted online. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times on social media platforms worldwide. International media outlets picked up the story. The BBC, CNN, National Geographic, and countless others featured segments on the penguin who swims 5,000 miles each year to visit the man who saved his life. That particular detail, the 5,000-mile swim, became a key part of how the story was shared, though it's worth noting that the actual distance and route of Dindim's journey remains somewhat speculative. Scientists believe that Dindim likely traveled to breeding colonies in Patagonia, possibly in Argentina, which would represent a round-trip journey of several thousand miles. However, without tracking devices, the exact route and distance couldn't be confirmed. The viral nature of the story reflected something deeper than just interest in an unusual animal tale. In an increasingly digital, disconnected age, the story of João and Dindim represented something profound about connection, loyalty, and love transcending barriers. Here was a 75-year-old retired bricklayer and part-time fisherman living a simple life on a Brazilian island, and a wild penguin that chose, year after year, to return to him. The story touched people's hearts because it suggested that genuine relationships, based on care, respect, and affection, could form in the most unexpected circumstances. The attention brought changes to João's life. Suddenly, his small house on Ilha Grande became a destination for curious tourists hoping to catch a glimpse of Dindim. During the penguin's annual visits, João would sometimes find strangers gathered on the beach near his property, cameras ready, hoping for a sighting. While João was generally gracious about the attention, he also became protective of Dindim's privacy and well-being. Wildlife authorities worked with João to establish some ground rules that would protect Dindim while allowing people to appreciate the unique relationship. Visitors were asked to maintain distance and keep quiet to avoid stressing the penguin. João would occasionally allow small groups to observe him and Dindim together, but he strictly limited direct interaction, ensuring that only he had physical contact with the bird. The international attention also brought scrutiny from conservation groups and animal welfare organizations. Some questioned whether João's relationship with Dindim was truly beneficial for the penguin or whether it represented an unhealthy dependence that interfered with natural behaviors. These concerns were understandable. The line between rescue/rehabilitation and inappropriate wildlife interaction can sometimes be blurry. However, most experts who studied the situation concluded that Dindim's case represented something unique. The penguin was clearly healthy, was maintaining natural behaviors like hunting and migration, and was returning to João voluntarily year after year. There was no confinement, no attempt to prevent natural behaviors, and no evidence that the relationship was harmful to Dindim's physical or psychological well-being. In fact, one could argue that João's initial rescue and continued presence provided Dindim with advantages: reliable supplemental food, a safe resting location, and protection from potential threats during the non-breeding season. Dr. Krajewski noted, "This is not a case of wildlife domestication or inappropriate human interference. This is a voluntary relationship maintained by both parties." Dindim returns each year not because he is forced or trained, but because he chooses to. That agency, that choice, makes all the difference. Beyond the heartwarming nature of the story, Dindim's relationship with João offers profound insights into animal cognition, emotion, and behavior. For too long, humans have underestimated the emotional and cognitive capacities of non-human animals, particularly birds. The old notion that birds operate purely on instinct, unable to form genuine emotional bonds or make meaningful choices, has been repeatedly challenged by modern research. Penguins, in particular, have demonstrated remarkable cognitive abilities. Studies have shown that they can recognize individual faces, both of other penguins and humans, remember locations and routes with extraordinary precision, engage in complex social behaviors, including cooperation and apparent mourning, and demonstrate problem-solving abilities that suggest sophisticated mental processing. Dindim's behavior suggests several important capabilities: navigation and memory. The fact that Dindim could locate João's specific beach after months at sea and thousands of miles of travel demonstrates extraordinary spatial memory and navigational ability. This requires the penguin to maintain a mental map of vast ocean territory and to deliberately choose to return to a specific location rather than simply following instinct or random movement. Social recognition. Dindim recognized João as an individual, distinguishing him from all other humans. The penguin's behavior toward João, allowing contact, following closely, vocalizing and greeting, was completely different from its behavior toward strangers, whom it would typically ignore or actively avoid. This indicates sophisticated facial recognition and social memory. Emotional attachment. While we must be careful about anthropomorphizing animal behavior, Dindim's consistent return to João over multiple years, along with the bird's clear displays of what appeared to be excitement upon reunion and contentment during time together, suggests emotional attachment beyond simple resource-seeking behavior. If Dindim's only motivation was access to food, the penguin could have found countless other reliable food sources along the Brazilian coast. The specific return to João suggests a social and emotional component to the motivation. Decision-making. Each year, Dindim made a choice. The penguin could have ended the pattern at any time, could have found other locations to spend the non-breeding season, could have remained with penguin colonies rather than repeatedly returning to a human. The consistency of the choice over multiple years indicates deliberate decision-making rather than random or compulsive behavior. These observations align with growing scientific evidence that birds, despite having brains structured differently from mammals, possess sophisticated cognitive and emotional capacities that rival many mammals. The old assumption that birds are somehow lesser than mammals in terms of intelligence and emotion has been thoroughly debunked by decades of research. Dindim's story also speaks to something important about humans. João's initial decision to help a suffering creature, despite having no obligation and no expectation of reward, reflects the best of human nature. His dedication to Dindim's care, his respect for the penguin's wildness, and his evident joy in their relationship demonstrate that humans are capable of forming meaningful connections with other species when we approach them with compassion, respect, and openness. In our modern world, where humans are increasingly isolated from direct contact with nature and wild animals, stories like João and Dindim's serve as important reminders of our connection to the broader living world. We share this planet with millions of other species, many of which possess rich inner lives, complex social structures, and capabilities that we're only beginning to understand and appreciate. While Dindim's story has a happy narrative, it's important to understand the broader context of threats facing Magellanic penguins and other marine species. The very incident that brought João and Dindim together, oil contamination, represents one of many serious threats to penguin populations worldwide. Magellanic penguins are currently classified as near threatened by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. While not yet critically endangered, populations have been declining, and the species faces numerous challenges. Oil pollution, marine oil pollution, whether from major spills or smaller, unreported incidents, poses a severe threat to seabirds. Oil destroys the waterproofing and insulating properties of feathers, leading to hypothermia and drowning. It's toxic when ingested, causing organ damage and death. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands of seabirds, including penguins, die annually from oil contamination in South Atlantic waters alone. Overfishing. Commercial fishing operations have dramatically reduced the abundance of small fish species that penguins depend on for food. When penguin feeding grounds overlap with commercial fisheries, adult penguins must travel farther to find food for themselves and their chicks, leading to increased chick mortality and reduced breeding success. Climate change. Rising ocean temperatures are shifting the distribution of fish stocks, forcing penguins to adapt their feeding patterns and migration routes. Changes in ocean currents and productivity affect the entire marine food web, with cascading effects on penguin populations. Additionally, increased frequency and intensity of storms can destroy nesting sites and reduce breeding success. Coastal development. Human development along coastal areas used by penguins for breeding and resting reduces available habitat. In some areas, tourist activities can disturb nesting colonies, causing penguins to abandon nests or reducing breeding success. Plastic pollution. Penguins sometimes ingest plastic debris, mistaking it for food. Plastic accumulation in digestive systems can cause starvation, and plastic pollution in the ocean damages entire ecosystems. Bycatch. Penguins can become accidentally caught in fishing nets and longlines, leading to drowning. While regulations exist to reduce bycatch, enforcement is inconsistent, especially in international waters. Given these threats, Dindim's survival represents something remarkable. The penguin not only recovered from severe oil contamination, a fate that kills most affected seabirds, but has thrived, successfully completing multiple annual migration cycles and presumably breeding successfully, given the regular departures during breeding season. João's rescue of Dindim was therefore not just an act of personal compassion, but a concrete conservation success story. Every individual penguin matters, particularly for a species experiencing population declines. While one penguin's survival might seem insignificant in statistical terms, Dindim's story has had a measurable impact in terms of raising global awareness about marine conservation issues. The international attention given to Dindim and João has helped highlight the threats facing penguins and other seabirds. Millions of people who might never have thought about oil pollution, overfishing, or marine conservation have been exposed to these issues through this story. In that sense, Dindim has become an ambassador for his species, a single penguin whose story has potentially influenced conservation awareness and action on a global scale. For João, the experience of his relationship with Dindim brought unexpected richness to his later years. In interviews over the years, João has spoken movingly about what Dindim means to him. "Dindim is like a child to me," João told one reporter. "I love this penguin like it's my own family. When he arrives each year, it's like my son is coming home. And when he leaves, I worry about him like a father worries about his son going off into the world." João's wife had passed away several years before he found Dindim, and he had no children. While he had other family members and was part of a close-knit island community, João had experienced loneliness in his later years. Dindim filled a space in João's life that had been empty, providing companionship, purpose, and joy. "I never expected anything like this to happen in my life," João reflected. "I'm just a simple man who lives quietly on an island. I'm not special. But God or nature or whatever you believe in gave me this gift, this friendship with Dindim. It has made me so happy. It has made my life feel meaningful in ways I never imagined." The relationship also gave João a sense of responsibility that extended beyond just caring for one penguin. He became more aware of environmental issues affecting marine life and would often talk to visitors about the importance of keeping the ocean clean, not polluting, and respecting wildlife. In his own small way, João became a conservation advocate, motivated by his love for Dindim and his understanding of the threats penguins face. João's daily life during Dindim's visits took on a rhythm centered around the penguin. He would wake early, prepare breakfast for himself, and fish for Dindim. Then they would spend the morning together, often at the beach. João continued his fishing activities but would time them around Dindim's presence, wanting to ensure his friend wasn't left alone for too long. Afternoons were often spent quietly, with João reading or doing chores while Dindim rested nearby. Evenings would see them back at the beach, watching the sunset together. People sometimes ask me if I worry that Dindim will stop coming back someday, João said. Of course I worry. Dindim is a wild animal, and the ocean is dangerous. Every year when he leaves, I wonder if it will be the last time I see him. But I try not to think about that. I try to just be grateful for the time we have together. Whether Dindim comes back one more time or 10 more times, I will always be thankful for the gift of knowing him. This attitude, gratitude for the present rather than anxiety about the future, perhaps explains part of the success and healthiness of the Dindim relationship. João never tried to possess or control Dindim, never tried to prevent the penguin's departures or alter the natural cycle of visits and migrations. He accepted the relationship on Dindim's terms, which allowed it to flourish as a true partnership rather than a one-sided dependency. The case of Dindim and João has prompted new research questions about penguin cognition, navigation, and social behavior. Several scientific studies have referenced or been inspired by their relationship. Researchers have become particularly interested in understanding how penguins form and maintain social bonds. While pair bonding between penguin mates has been extensively studied, the mechanisms underlying these bonds, the cognitive processes, emotional states, and behavioral patterns involved, remain incompletely understood. Dindim's attachment to a human provides a unique window into these processes, suggesting that the fundamental cognitive and emotional capacities underlying pair bonding in penguins can be generalized beyond conspecific relationships. Studies on penguin navigation have also gained new dimensions from Dindim's case. The precision with which Dindim returns to João's specific location each year is remarkable even for a species known for navigational prowess. Understanding the mechanisms that allow this level of precision, whether it involves visual landmarks, magnetic field detection, ocean current recognition, or other sensory inputs, has implications for understanding animal cognition more broadly. There's also interest in studying the physiological aspects of Dindim's recovery and continued health. The penguin's recovery from severe oil contamination was itself unusual. Most seabirds that experience that level of oil exposure die, even with professional veterinary intervention. Understanding what factors contributed to Dindim's survival could inform better wildlife rehabilitation protocols. Some researchers have proposed attempting to fit Dindim with a tracking device during one of the penguin's visits to João, which would allow scientists to map the actual migration route and gather data on diving behavior, ocean temperature preferences, and travel patterns. However, João has been hesitant about this, worried that the stress of capture and device attachment might harm Dindim or disrupt the penguin's trust. This concern is valid. Wild animal capture and tagging procedures, while valuable for research, always involve some risk and stress to the animal. The case has also contributed to broader discussions about animal emotion and consciousness. For decades, scientists were trained to avoid anthropomorphizing animal behavior, to always seek the most mechanistic, non-emotional explanation for observed behaviors. While this caution served important purposes, preventing unfounded assumptions and maintaining scientific rigor, it also sometimes led to dismissing evidence of genuine emotional and cognitive complexity in animals. Modern animal behavior research increasingly recognizes that many species experience emotions, form meaningful social bonds, and possess subjective experiences of their lives. Dindim's behavior toward João, the apparent joy at reunion, the contentment during time together, the consistent choice to return, provides compelling naturalistic evidence supporting this view, at least for penguins. Dr. Krajewski noted, "We're moving past the old false dichotomy between cold scientific observation and sentimental anthropomorphism. We can acknowledge that Dindim likely experiences emotions analogous to what we would call affection, loyalty, or happiness, while still maintaining scientific rigor in studying and describing these phenomena. The evidence for rich emotional lives in many animals, including birds, is now overwhelming."